Is now once again the rightful host, and we've just had a little bit of back and forth here, but I think we're going to go ahead and begin, and as more folks kind of pop in, we will that will be great. I am thrilled to see everyone. We're grateful you're here, and it's just wonderful to be together. And as the weather is sunny, I dream of next year when we can all staff our fantastic Pride booth and reach out with love to the larger Rhode Island and Pride community together. But in this moment, if I was to come up with another possibility to be here with Rabbi Eger is just a fantastic, fantastic way to celebrate Pride this year. And I could not be more thrilled that she is with us this evening. I don't know, some of you might have gotten a drive-by of a drop-off of her book or bought it on your own, and if not, we'll make sure that everyone has a way to get their hands on it. It is absolutely beautiful, and I'm very much looking forward to having her share her process and share about it. But to begin, I will just to introduce Rabbi Eger is really such a monumental task, and I want to hear her speak because more than myself, there's so much to say. But I will let you know that Rabbi Eger was instrumental in passing and helping to pass the 2000 CCAR resolution in support of officiation at gay and lesbian weddings. She also was in March of 2015, she became the 60th president of the Central Conference of American Rabbis, becoming the first openly gay or lesbian rabbi in that position. She was the first woman and first openly gay person to be the president of the Southern California Board of Rabbis. In many ways, her story reads as a gallery of firsts. She's currently the rabbi of Congregation Kol Ami in West Hollywood, and we just could not be more thrilled to have her with us. So Rabbi Eger, I am going to invite you to share a little bit about your journey to this moment. And when you were installed as the president of the CCAR, you were interviewed by the New York Times, and you told them that your career has in many ways been shown the arc of LGBTQ rights. And so in light of that, I thought that was a beautiful way to put it. And I'm wondering if you can share that arc with us right now, and then before we hear a little bit more about your wonderful book.
Thank you, Rabbi Mack. It's what an honor to be here with all of you. What an honor to celebrate Pride together this Pride Month. It's certainly been a difficult time over the last several months as we've been sheltering in place. I'm in California, I'm in Los Angeles area. We've been sheltering in place since mid-March, just after Purim, and we're just in the slow process of reopening here. But of course, these recent weeks of turmoil and of protest and of lifting up voices of our people of color community gives us all pause to think very deeply about what it means to be not in the mainstream, means to be an other. And so the themes of Pride and Pride Month and the themes that we're seeing in our society about issues with police brutality and police reform and the need for that is something that is very rooted in the history of the LGBTQI plus movement for equality and pride. Let me share a little bit about my own story, and then we're going to talk about Mishkan Ga'ava, where Pride dwells, this wonderful new collection printed and published by the Central Conference of American Rabbis. And it is, I'll just say this quick word, is it's meant to be the queer supplement to the Reform movement's prayer books. It shares a name with our Siddur, Mishkan Tefillah, with our Machzor, Mishkan HaNefesh, and this is Mishkan Ga'ava. So we need to think about it in the context of that, and that fact is a very important fact, and I think it also talks about a little bit, I'll share with my story. I was born actually in Pennsylvania, but grew up in Memphis, Tennessee. We moved there as a family when I was young, and it was just after Martin Luther King had been assassinated. And I talk about this because it was my rabbi, Rabbi James Wack of blessed memory, who was president of the Memphis Ministerial Association when and invited Dr. King to come to Memphis to help resolve a sanitation workers strike. The sanitation workers were largely Black. The people that drove the sanitation trucks were white, and they would not let the sanitation workers who did the actual garbage men ride in the cab with them. They had to hang onto the back of the trucks. They wanted a 10-cent raise. The African-American workers went on strike. The city would not negotiate, and Dr. King was brought in not once, but twice. And it was on his second trip that he was assassinated. And Dr. Wax, Rabbi Wax, was instrumental in leading a huge protest down the streets of Memphis. This is the environment I grew up with. I grew up in a congregation, in a historic Reform movement congregation, a classical Reform congregation, but a congregation that was committed to social justice, and even in the Deep South. That imprint was always with me. And I was ordained at Hebrew Union College Jewish Institute of Religion in 1988. In those years, you could not be openly gay or lesbian. We didn't even use the other letters of the alphabet that we use for our community. But already in the Reform movement, there were discussions happening. Could one be ordained as a rabbi or a cantor and be openly gay? And in the 80s, we formed in the mid-80s, we formed a small underground group at Hebrew Union College called Hineni, We're Here. And we used to have meetings way off campus, because in those years you could be kicked out for being gay or lesbian from Hebrew Union College. You wouldn't be ordained. And so after ordination in 1988, I interviewed for jobs, and it was kind of an open secret. I talked about being kind of in the plexiglass closet. I wasn't kind of not really out formally, although, you know, those who knew kind of knew. I had started at the Los Angeles campus and wanting to run back to California because it was a much more open environment. But at the time I was offered no jobs, and particularly turned down jobs because people said, you know, Denise, we really like you, but we can't hire you because you're a lesbian. So I took the only job I was offered, and it was after ordination, and I became the first gay or lesbian person to be the rabbi of Beth Chaim Chadashim, which was the world's first gay and lesbian synagogue, and affiliated with the Reform movement in 1973 here in Los Angeles. It was the height of the AIDS crisis in 1988. I was only part-time, and I spent most of my time, all of my time, frankly, just going from hospital to hospital to hospital. Those were the days when people were diagnosed and buried within a month. And it was a pretty horrible time to be 28 years old and standing at the graves of other 28-year-olds. No one taught me anything about this at HUC JIR at our seminary. And so that is how I began as kind of what I call an accidental activist. Here I was in the middle of another kind of pandemic, and also at a congregation that was the LGBTQ congregation for Los Angeles, and the first in the country. And so this kind of began to shape my career and the arc of the kind of work that I did. And I think I mentioned my early background from being from Memphis. I was so influenced that I knew by my congregation and my rabbi, I knew that I couldn't sit silently by. And so these facts come together to help propel me to use my voice to speak truth to power, which I've tried to do throughout my career. And so in 1990, the Central Conference of American Rabbis came to a resolution that people could enter rabbinical school and cantorial school, cantor, at that point, and be openly gay or lesbian. And that's when I came out publicly in the press in 1990 in service of that resolution. Why? Because up until that point, it was kind of a hypothetical. We didn't really have we knew there were gay rabbis. Most people weren't, nobody was really out. There were just a handful, and most of them had been outed. And so I came out in the Los Angeles Times, we did a very structured interview, and it was picked up around the world, so that there was really a face and a name, that this wasn't just something that was a hypothetical, but a real live colleagues who were affected. And so I guess there's never been turning back after that. And so throughout my career, because I've served in our queer community here in Los Angeles now for 32 years as its rabbi, I have had to develop through the years responses to our LGBTQ lives. There were no ceremonies for commitment ceremonies, what we used to call weddings before it was legal. There were no ceremonies for name changing when someone was transitioning gender. I had to write them. And so through the years, I wrote quite a fair amount of rituals and liturgy and prayers for pride and all kinds of World AIDS Day remembrances. And every year around this time of year, or just about the end of May, colleagues would come knocking on the door. And they would say, "Hey, Denise, do you have anything for Pride? Oh, I have to officiate at a wedding. Two people in my congregation want to have a commitment ceremony." This is before, right, Obergefell. We're celebrating 5 years of the anniversary of the federal marriage, right? Right. This was before they want to get married. I have two women that just had a baby, and we want to do a special baby naming ceremony. Do you have anything that acknowledges that? So I finally decided, enough. We need to have a prayer book. We need to have a collection of rituals and ceremonies and prayers and meditations and essays that absolutely reflect our LGBTQI plus community. And so after I've done a lot of political work, I did the first wedding in California after marriage equality became legal here in 2008. I was able to marry the plaintiffs in that case here in California on the steps of the Beverly Hills courthouse to a bevy of cameras. It was actually, they were allowed as the plaintiffs to marry the day before everybody else. And so I've had the privilege and the honor of serving our queer community as a rabbi, and being able, as part of that, to have some incredible opportunities and moments of being willing to take the risk to speak that truth to power. I'm going to share some slides with you at this moment so we can look a little more deeply into Mishkan Tefillah. If you'll just give me a second, and I'll get it into the right presenter view for us. Hold on one second. Here we go. So Mishkan Ga'ava, as I said earlier, means we translated where pride dwells. Of course, the Mishkan is the tabernacle that our ancestors schlepped through the desert wanderings, and Ga'ava is pride. So Mishkan Ga'ava, where pride dwells. And the book is, as Rabbi Max said, a celebration of LGBTQ Jewish life and ritual. And so this is, so you get a better look at the book covers. This is the book cover, And but it's not my work alone. I'm the editor, and yes, I have a lot of selections in this book. But after I finished my term as president of the Central Conference of American Rabbis, and perhaps one of the greatest honors of my life, to serve our movement and to serve our colleagues and to work cooperatively with the other Jewish professional groups, are the American Conference of Cantors, the Association of Reformed Jewish Educators. You know, you need another project. So finally we thought that I'm talking with Rabbi Hera Person, our chief executive, who's now the, who was then the publisher of the press. I said, it was coming up on the 50th anniversary of the Stonewall riots. And I said to her, you know, we should be doing something to mark it. And so that is what we did. As you know, I hope I don't have to do a deep history lesson for this particular group, but of course, Stonewall riots in some ways marks the beginning of what we call the gay liberation, gay pride movement. It's certainly what we commemorate in this Pride Month of June, because of course it happened for 3 days at the end of June, June 26th through 29th in 1969, after the Stonewall Inn was raided and yet another police raid. Finally, the patrons decided enough, and they rioted and they fought back. And you can see here, let me get back here. You can see here two of the folks that said, we've had it, we're not taking it anymore. Sylvia Riviera and Marsha P. Johnson, transgender women of color, who led the way in fighting back against the police. As I said in my early part of the evening, pride has its roots in trying to throw off police brutality. And so all of the things that we're experiencing now in the protest march around the country, still decrying that for people of color today, police brutality is a way that we can connect our celebration of pride, our commemoration of the Stonewall riots with what's happening today, and why we need to be together in this protest. Interestingly enough, there were many things in LGBTQ history that preceded Stonewall in 1969. In fact, in Los Angeles, we had our first police riot when a riot against the police when they raided the Black Cat Bar in the Silver Lake area of Los Angeles 3 years earlier than Stonewall. In 1968, the Metropolitan Community Church was founded in Los Angeles, the gay church, Reverend Troy Perry. And it was out of this church that the first gay synagogue was born, that Beth Chaim Chadashim, which I once served as its rabbi, was born. And so we have a lot around the country. In Philadelphia, there were already protests in front of Independence Hall every July 4th for homophile rights as early as 1965. And so we had pop-up kinds of protests and marches prior to Stonewall, but Stonewall really is that moment where kind of the movement coalesced for gay rights. And of course, last year was the 50th anniversary of that Stonewall riot, but this year is the 50th anniversary of the parades or the marches, because 1 year later, in 4 cities around the country, Los Angeles, Chicago, New York, and San Francisco, each mounted commemorative marches. They weren't parades. Like in LA, we have big parades with floats and marching bands, and it's almost like the Rose Parade, except on gay steroids. But the original march was really to commemorate this moment of Stonewall and to continue to push forward the agenda about equality. And so this year is the 50th anniversary of all of the marches. So to get back to Mishkan Ga'ava for a minute, Mishkan Ga'ava was designed to be a book that would come out exactly now to commemorate the first Pride marches and to commemorate the 50th anniversary of Stonewall. I'm going to jump ahead here because I want to share with you just a few things from the book. As I said, I'm not the only contributor to the book. I edited it, and I do have a number of pieces that I said that I've written through the years and had to write to bring meaning to my community and my congregants' lives. But there are many pieces in this book. We solicited pieces in an open call for submission. So there are pieces from rabbis, from poets, from activists in the LGBTQ community. And I want to share just a few with you because I think it will give you a bit of a flavor of what we've been trying to do with this, with Mishkan Ga'ava, Where Pride Dwells. This particular piece, A Blessing for My LGBTQ Ancestors, was written by Dave Yadid. Dave is a JTS, Jewish Theological Seminary rabbinical student at the present time. And to me, it's one of the most poignant and beautiful pieces in the book. He wrote this as a way for us, perhaps during Pride Month, and Rabbi Mack, I'll let you decide whether you want to use this in your Shabbat Pride service, is perhaps a nod to our avot and imahot. You know, in our services, we, in the tefillah, we praise the God of Abraham and Sarah, Isaac and Rivka and Jacob and Rachel and Leah. And this he conceived as a different kind of blessing for my ancestors. You who fought to love, you who prayed to the same God I do, you who insisted on your dignity even when the world said you had none, you who died of AIDS while fighting for a cure so that people like me might live, you who were shot in a massacre while on the dance floor, you who could not come out and held your secret until your dying day, you who were insulted, shamed, and beaten and brutalized, yet kept walking, you who contributed your fierceness, your originality, your art, and your voice to this world, I walk on your memory. I walk this path smooth and chartered by your sacrifice towards justice, towards holiness, towards freedom. Baruch atah Adonai Magen Avraham ve'ezrat Serah. I think you get a sense of here of the connection that our ancestors, we talk about in Jewish tradition, that our ancestors, of course, are our foremothers, our forefathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah. But what about for the LGBTQ person? We have our own maybe biological parents. Some people are very enmeshed and part of their biological families. And for some LGBTQI plus people, their biological families are dangerous for them, or they've been excommunicated from their families. So who becomes your ancestor, your mentor, your elder? The truth is there are generations of queer people that came before us. Some, as in we are mentioned in this particular prayer, who helped change the world. So our kids can come out as young as they do, how now they can give voice to, if they're a transgender young person, that we can be sensitive and understand that there's nothing wrong with them because as was done in generations past and not so long ago and still in some places. But here, this particular prayer, I think, acknowledges that that community is larger than perhaps our biological community or even our family of choice, and that we have a long history that stretches behind us and, God willing, in front of us as well. I want to just share a couple more, and then I know we want to have some time also for Rabbi Mack had some questions, and I want to talk about couple other things about this particular book that's unique. And it's, even though we say this is Mishkan Ga'ava, Where Pride Dwells, there's a lot of things in this prayer book, and I call it a prayer book because it is, that could be just as good for someone who is not gay. There's a lot for family and parents of, there's a lot for allies. But one of the things that's been interesting in the process of writing this book and editing it and collecting the prayers is that we find that the experience that LGBTQI people have that are part of our life cycle, right? when we want to have children, unless we had children in we were in a previously heterosexual marriage or a relationship where we had kids, to have a family and make a family with children, you have to think about it. There's a process, as we know, right? If you're two men, you have to adopt or have surrogate. For women, you have to find a donor or adopt, or again, maybe surrogacy. So we're thinking about how every step of the process. But the truth is, adoption is something that is not only obviously for gay people, right? So we've actually created prayers and liturgy in this book that might be used for anyone going through these processes, these particular life moments. And we've been finding, and as I've been talking more around the country and talking about the book, that we are finding that people are really hearkening to this particular, to the different prayers that can be opened up and will be able to be used not only for lesbian and gay folk, but way beyond. So this particular prayer was written by Rabbi Greg Cantor. Rabbi Cantor is the associate rabbi in our Charleston, South Carolina congregation. Rabbi Max smiling, she can see she knows Rabbi Cantor. And he's an openly gay man, and came out a number of years ago, and he wrote this prayer when he and his spouse finished adopting one of their children. And I think, again, it's just so beautiful to me. Ribono Shel Olam, sovereign of the universe, mother, father to us all, may I or we be like Mordecai, who raised a child to be brave and sensitive. May we be like Pharaoh's daughter, who raised a child whose leadership has served all of humanity. May we be like Naomi, who adopted the son of her daughter-in-law and raised him in anticipation of the coming of a messianic age. Ribono Shel Olam, sovereign of the universe, parenthood is a journey fraught with perils and mystery. Help us to navigate the rough waters with wisdom, love, and patience. Help us to embody the highest virtues of those who came before us and to pass those qualities along to our child. May our family always be worthy of your Torah and your blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shechianu v'kiyamanu v'gianu lazman hazeh. Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, sovereign of the universe, who enriches our life with new life, sustains us and our families, and brings us to this joyous occasions. Again, nothing particularly lesbian or gay or trans or queer about this prayer, but context is everything. And that really, really, really matters. I do want to spend, as we're here together, a little bit to talk just one moment about kind of a theology for a minute. And by that, I mean, what is kind of the idea here in our relationship with God? One of the things that I have taught through the years that has been so, I think, has been important to me, and I think a signature of my Torah, if you will, as a rabbi, has been the idea for LGBTQI plus people is that we should not have to compartmentalize our lives. That our gayness or our lesbianness or our transness is over here. Our Jewishness is over here. Our gender identity is over here in another place, but rather we should be striving to be whole human beings. That is what God wants of us and wants of every person, is to be an integrated and whole and healthy human being. I know from an earlier time in my own life and in the kind of queer movement life, you know, to survive, people had to do that. We had to be closeted. We couldn't be all of ourselves. We couldn't, if we were trans, we couldn't allow that part of our identity out, right? For fear of losing jobs and homes and relationships and families. And that still happens to people today. But as religious people, and we as Reformed Jews are religious people, we are liberal religious people. And we have to also understand what kind of love are we going to reflect of God's love in the world. And so I've tried to teach the concept of shleimut, of wholeness and completeness. And that, so this particular book, Mishkan Ga'ava, Where Pride Dwells, tries to take that approach, that the prayers we are reciting as Jews, the prayers we are reciting to our loved ones, whether they're Jewish or not, and with our loved ones, whether they're Jewish or not, should reflect the ideal that we can be all of ourselves, loved by God as we bring love into the world, and that we truly are created B'Tselem Elohim, in the image of God. And that is what these prayers try to reflect in Where Pride Dwells and in Mishka'ava. For me, through the years, that is how I have tried to celebrate my pride in the world, about being a woman, a rabbi, a lesbian, a mom, a partner, a wife, an activist, and that you can't separate one part of me from the other. They all make up who I am, and what a blessing it is, and what a blessing it has been to be that. I'm gonna. There's some particular prayers for. There's a lot in here I want to just mention for trans and non-binary folk too. It's not only around the L and the G, and there's stuff prayers written by and for bisexual people, pansexual people. I wanted to particularly point out Dr. Joy Ladin. Some of you may know her. Or know of her. She is an openly trans woman who was a professor at Yeshiva University. She was so enthusiastic about our book, she gave us permission to use some pieces that she had previously published. And I want to share her piece called Survival Guide. No matter how old you are, it helps to be young when you're coming to life, to be unfinished, a mysterious statement, a journey from star to star. So break out a box of Crayolas and draw your family looking uncomfortably away from the you've exchanged for the mannequin they named. You should help clean up, but you're so busy being afraid to love or not, you're missing the fun of clothing yourself in the embarrassment of life. Frost your lids with midnight, lid your heart with frost, rub them over the hormones that regulate the production of love from karmic garbage dumps. Turn yourself into the real you can only discover by being other. Voila, you're free. Learn to love the awkward silence you are going to be. Truly a powerful experience for many of our trans family and friends and us of what that experience is like. And we need to not only name it and embrace it, but allow that freedom to exist and to thrive. I'll say this, the book is divided into two sections. The first half of the book are individual and prayers for private meditation and private prayer. There's prayers for Shabbat and weekdays. And the second half of the book is more community focused. And so just like we have a Jewish life cycle, right? Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, Simchat Torah, Hanukkah. There's a queer life cycle, right? We're in one of the big holiday seasons now, Pride. But there are other queer holidays, right? Lesbian Visibility Day, Bisexual Visibility Day, Transgender Day of Remembrance, World AIDS Day. Here in California, we even have Harvey Milk Day on May 22nd, his birthday. It's a state holiday in California, a day dedicated specifically to living out his legacy of equality. So second half of the book is liturgy prayers and inspirational material that can be used for the maybe perhaps more congregational settings, for Pride Shabbat, for Pride Passover Seder, for World AIDS Day, Transgender Day of Remembrance, National Coming Out Day. We even wrote an Ushpizin, a welcoming of the queer ancestors to your sukkah. Maybe this year your Havara can do that one night together. So what are your gay ancestors? So I think for that, that, as I said, here's a particular piece that I wrote in part for a candle lighting for Pride weekend, if you have Pride Shabbat On the Sabbath of LGBTQ Pride Weekend, we welcome the Shabbat into our midst. On this night, we express the love in our hearts for gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender people everywhere. We celebrate that we were created in the divine image, and we pray on this Sabbath that all people will be able to escape oppression and taste the freedom of the promised land. The introduction to lighting Shabbat candles. So I hope that we can take our inspiration from our tradition on the one hand, our lived experience as LGBTQ plus people and allies, and reinvigorate our Jewishness, our Jewish life, our Jewish prayers and liturgy. Bayard Rustin, as you know, maybe you don't, he was Martin Luther King's right-hand man. He and A. Randolph Phillips planned the March on Washington, and where King gave his famous I Have a Dream speech. He was a gay man, very closeted in those early years of the civil rights movement, came out publicly much later in life. But I'm always moved by his statement, and I think it speaks a lot to what I've tried to do in my rabbinate and what I think we're all called to do in this time in our country. We need in every generation a community, a group of angelic troublemakers. I think that is our call for this Pride, to be angelic troublemakers, to stir the pot, to speak truth to power, to celebrate our pride, to join in coalition with others who are fighting oppression wherever we find it. That is our task, and I hope you'll join me in that. You can get Mishkan Ga'ava at this address, pride.ccarpress.org. And if you buy it from the CCR Press, there's a 20% discount through the end of June. Otherwise, you can go on Amazon, the great Amazon, and get it there. But if you prefer a Kindle version, you can only get it at CCAR Press. So pride.ccarpress.org. And so, again, Mishkan Ga'ava, where pride dwells. Happy to take your questions, Rabbi Mack, and anybody else.
Thank you, Rabbi Eger. That was beautiful, and it is a beautiful book. Cantor Judy and I were just saying that I wish I had had this for years and years. All of the World AIDS Days, all of the Seders, this has been missing from my rabbinate. And so thank you for creating it and bringing it into the lexicon of our movement, the sacred texts of our movement. So I'm very grateful for that. And I actually have a number of questions, but I also know this crew, and I suspect you do also. So let me open it up first to see if anybody else would like to ask a question of Rabbi Eger before I jump in with some of mine. Everybody's being so quiet. I will jump in, and then if anyone wants to put it in the chat box or wave your hand at me or at Judy Mosley, we'll unmute you. How does that sound? So Rabbi Eger, I personally have been amazed and moved by the ways in which you have shattered what some might call double glass ceilings. Your rabbinate really in your career is based on social justice. I'm wondering if you can share a little bit about your experience of that and how some of the highs and some of the lows. I feel like we're in a moment. Some incredible successes when we look at some of the legislation that has been passed. We're just wondering if you can share your wisdom with us on that. We're in a moment where I feel like hearing about some of these victories for justice is really helpful and fills the wells.
Well, I think that's a really really important question to talk about that, because justice doesn't happen overnight. Equality doesn't happen overnight. The truth of the matter is that there are still more than 25 states in the United States where you can get married on Sunday and be fired at work on Monday. And in particular, with this administration at the federal level, they're actively working to dismantle LGBTQ rights at this very time. Just this week, we saw the Trump administration and the Department of Justice argue that agencies that receive federal funding ought to be able to deny LGBTQ parents the ability to adopt out of agencies, and those agencies should still be able to get federal funds. So let alone that the Trump administration dismissed transgender members from the military service. And so we lost some incredibly important people to the security and safety of our country because of the discrimination and hatred. So the work is never all finished. It's still not done for LGBTQ people or for, as we see on the streets today, for people of color and for women. And so, yes, it's been hard. It's not easy. My current congregation, Congregation Kolami, is a congregation I founded in 28 years ago when I left Beth Chaim Chadashim. We founded it with 35 people. Why? Because no one was going to hire a out lesbian rabbi in the early 90s. And so if I wanted to work as a rabbi, if I wanted to continue my career, I found some people who were willing to toss their kippah in with me, and we built a community because of that, there was a ceiling, and in many places there still is a glass ceiling for LGBTQ clergy particularly, and let's be honest, while some corporations are very good, there are still many places where qualified LGBTQ plus people do not get their promotion, do not get into the C-suite, just like it's true for women. And so there's still, I think, much work to be done, and it can get frustrating. It can get frustrating when you know that you are talented and you know that you know your stuff and you want to be able to give, whether you're clergy or not clergy. Like, you know, when you're good at your job and you want to be able to share your expertise and to be able to say, no, you're a queer person, so that's not happening. So there's been many of those moments. But I'm just somebody that just doesn't take no for an answer. So I think there is a place for righteous indignation. You have to be, I think as I've gotten older, I've learned to measure that a lot better and to temper that a lot better than I did perhaps in my earlier part of my career when I think I pissed off more than a few people. And maybe I still do, I guess. But I think the reality of that is that change takes time. And I think I was really heartened, if going back to the Obergefell federal marriage decision 5 years ago, I had the privilege of being on the Supreme Court steps the day of the argument before the court, which was really powerful, and to speak on those steps in the rally. And I had the pleasure a little over a year ago when our rabbis, we met in Cincinnati to be the moderator in an interview, Jim Obergefell, the plaintiff in the case that won marriage equality. And I think one of the interesting things is that there was just an article in Forbes the other day. I don't know whether some of you saw it. It went around Facebook posting that now 2/3 of Americans are totally cool with same-sex marriage. That wasn't true 5 years ago. And it certainly wasn't true 10 years ago when we were dealing with this in California. Because remember, in California in 2008, our Supreme Court said that we could get married on June 16th, 2008. That's the case that I got to do that first wedding. But then the Mormons and the Catholics spent $40 million on a political campaign to take away the right to marriage equality in California. That was Proposition 8, where I was a statewide leader and the clergy face of that battle in our state. And, you know, the voters voted to take away our marriage rights in November of 2008, which was like an amazing night, right? President Obama was elected, the first African-American president. Great joy and great sadness, deep sobbing sadness. So you know, I think for the time now, Rabbi Mack, that we have to remember that it's not going to be overnight, that justice, the wheels do turn slowly, and then some, but it takes force, and it takes all of us turning and turning and turning until that force must move things ahead. And I think that's the best advice that I could give for all of us as we engage in these new battles for justice and renewed battles for justice. Right, you're muted.
Wait, there we go. That's an inspiration and helpful as we, I think, as we march through this moment. I'll invite anyone else again to please feel free to either wave your arms around madly or to post a question in the chat box. And while we're waiting, I have another question. I was very much struck reading through the book, and in the introduction, you say really beautifully that you explain that and that this book is really an emphatic statement that gay life is spiritual life and queer life is holy life, and it is an incredibly powerful notion, I think, reading this book as a statement and a reminder that prayer is subversive in change-making and part of our social justice work. And I think we sometimes lose sight of that. And I'm wondering if you can speak a little bit about that in the context of the work itself.
That's just such a beautiful way that you phrased it, Rabbi. Because I think the way you phrased it, that the prayer is also subversive, and particularly in this case, right? We all know, I'm sure you have it in Rhode Island too, if we were standing out and being at a pride celebration, the people that stand with the signs, God made Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve, they're regulars at our pride parade and pride festivals. So, you know, there's so much caught up in this idea that sexuality is a bad thing, right? That's not actually the Jewish way. That's a Christian overlay, a Victorian overlay that we in America inherited. And there's something beautiful about the way we express with our bodies, the feelings that we have. And that's what is the blessing. And so I think one of our attempts to also with Mishkan Ga'ava, where pride dwells, is to reinforce exactly that idea that our sexuality is holy, it's God-given. How we use it, we can use it in a bad way or a good way. But being gay, lesbian, bi, trans, and expressing our sexuality, expressing our gender identity is not a bad thing. And we religious people, we Reformed Jews, must continue to reinforce that because of all the other messages that are out there. I always say that coming out is an act of courage and holiness. That is what we have to know. And the truth is gay and lesbian, bisexual, transgender people and allies, we always have to come out. I may have come out in the press in 1990, but when I have a new doctor, I have to come out to her or him every single time because I want them to know who I am and to treat me in the kind of healthcare that I need for my personhood. So you're always coming in out. You don't have the luxury of hiding and just going along with passing. There is always this coming out, no matter how old. I was on a podcast the other day that targeted seniors and the elderly. And we had a long discussion about what happens as LGBTQ people age, and then they perhaps no longer have a partner or never had a partner, never was able to, they're alone as they age, and then they must go into some kind of assisted living or care center. For LGBTQ people, a lot of the caretakers in those kinds of places are folks that are not trained, are not trained in diversity or in equity. They're not trained in inclusiveness. They're often run by people who are, a lot of those kinds of homes are run by people with particular faith traditions that are antithetical to LGBTQ people. And so for maybe someone lived a life that was very open, she or he or they have to go back into a closet again at 85. So we have to think about this notion about holiness and helping people embrace who they are in a positive, loving way. And a synagogue has a special role to play in that, both synagogue leaders, both lay and clergy, and particularly for our children, our youngest, so that they can grow up, both those that are queer and those that are not queer, in a world where they are advocates. And for them to understand the blessing of human sexuality.
Absolutely. No, it's beautiful. I'll ask again, anyone else who's with us have a question or want to share in this moment? Would love to hear all of your voices. Feel free to jump in at any time, but never fear. I always have more
Jody,
questions.
I unmuted you.
Oh, Jody, great.
Thank you. I just wanted to say I was struck by the phrase courage and holiness. I love that. And I think that's a really useful phrase for us to use with congregations, since I think for us as a committee, so to speak, as a little group, it's part of our mission to speak to the congregation about how important it is for folks to feel comfortable in our setting and for folks to feel the safety of coming out and being who they are, and that it takes courage and it is holy. To be themselves is just beautiful and powerful and an act of activism.
Yes.
And spirituality all at the same time. So I just love that phrase. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Oh, I also wanted to say that I do trainings in senior housing, and I just couldn't agree with you more about what is lost for our seniors who are maybe LGBTQIA. And it's very sad.
Thank you for the work you're doing.
And thank you.
Melissa, was that a hand I saw, or no? No. Cheryl.
So I just want to ask if you, Sarah, could send out the poem by Joy Ladin. That was just so beautiful. I'd like to have that.
Absolutely, happy to share the poem. And what I can also do is, as the way we signed up we can share, we have all of your emails, so I can send the link because the whole book is beautiful. And there are many things in here that the poem is the tip of the iceberg, but I absolutely will share. It's a lovely addition to all of the mishkanot, I guess, of our movement, so to speak.
Right.
Really grateful to have it. There's a Misha Berach in here for legislators. I loved that. I think that's absolutely, it's stunning. It's really a beautiful, beautiful way to sanctify some of the work we do when we march down to the State House.
Listen, they need encouragement, Rabbi. A lot of times they want to do the right thing sometimes, and they there's so many pressures on our electeds, and so whatever we can do to help them, give them the courage they need to do what's right and just and equitable, we have to do that too.
So I'm wondering if you can share a little bit. I know that when you were at Beth Chaim Chadashim, you were really front and center in pastoral care and justice work at the height of the AIDS crisis. And I'm wondering if you can share a little bit about that experience and how it transformed you and your career going forward from that moment.
Well, I'll tell you, it really prepared me for this pandemic in many, many ways. I think one of the things, it took me a long time to kind of work through what it meant to be, as I said earlier, 28 and burying 28-year-olds. Most rabbis, when they are young rabbis out of seminary, get a portfolio in their congregations that is the youth group and young adults, and there's kind of an arc, right? You work with young people, and then maybe you do a lot of weddings. You're working in the preschool with young kids, and then as you age into the rabbinate a little bit, you're doing a more adult ed, and then you're working your way through the more normative life cycle. I think what happened is I ended up doing thousands of funerals. I was in at the early part of my career. And then we all had babies. There was a baby boom, a gaby boom on the West Coast. And a lot of us actually out of the ashes of our friends and lovers who died, knew that we needed to affirm life. And so that was when my congregation, Kolami, I'm at Congregation Kolami in West Hollywood. That was when our Sunday school was thriving. We had a huge Sunday school, religious school, and youth activities. Or just after, as the drugs became more available and people were living longer. So in the mid to late 90s and early 2000s, that's when our kids were thriving. And then, so we were working on marriage equality. So, and now people are aging. So the life cycle of how my career has worked has been from death to birth to marriage to aging. And now, sadly, I'm working with a generation that is aging out, but there's a whole new group of young people on the scene, and they have a different kind of way of being in the world, LGBTQI plus folks, right? When I was growing up, we didn't have non-binary. You might have been androgynous, you might have been a butch lesbian, but they didn't identify that way. And there's so many other ways to identify as with both our gender expression and our sexual orientation. And so I think that there's a whole new, as we say, rainbow of ways of being. And to me, that's a blessing and very exciting.
Thank you. I see Barbara has a question in the chat box. I'm going to read it to you. With the intense and needed focus on racism now, which Jews have strongly supported, have you found that there is support in the Black community for the LGBTQ community? I've seen that sometimes there's a religious beliefs that conflict with that. So kind of intersectionality.
Yeah, that intersection. I don't think the African American community is monolithic in any way, shape, or form. And I think just like the Jewish community isn't, or the gay community isn't, and there are so many people of color in the LGBTQ community, that I don't think we can just make those kinds of generalizations. I think there are African Americans who are fundamentalists Christian and fundamentalist Muslim. I think that there are white evangelical as well. But I'll tell you what, Thursday night at 8 your time, 8 Eastern, 5 Pacific, we're having the big book party for Mishkan Ga'ava, Where Pride Dwells. It's co-sponsored by the CCAR and the Human Rights Campaign. And so that you can register, it's free, it's a Zoom conversation. The new-ish president of the Human Rights Campaign, Alfonso David, will be with us and Rabbi Hera Person. And then a panel of queer LGBTQ plus religious leaders. and it will be Black and white and Asian and Muslim and Christian and Jewish. And we're going to have a conversation about queer spirituality and what does it mean. It's called Pride Inside. Love to have you. You can go to the CCAR website and sign up, or follow me on the social media at Denise Eger on Twitter, DeniseEger. And happy to find you there. You can find me on Instagram, Rabbi Denise Eger, and follow my page on Facebook, Rabbi Denise Eger. Yes, Judy put it up on in the chat there too. Thank you.
Perfect. Anyone else would like to share an experience or any thoughts or ask questions?
I just want to thank you so much, Rabbi, for this wonderful book. It's something that the community that we share has needed for a very long time, and it's beautiful, and it goes straight to the heart, and it leads us to a path of shlemut, and mazel tov to you on it.
Thank you, Rabbi. It means a lot.
Yeah, thank you for the concept of wholeness that you talked about as part of your rabbinate, and to be able to, this book is a way to help us and acknowledge the importance of having all of ourselves together, not parsing out Jewish here, gay there, other things here or there, and to bring a sanctity to our life as gay people too. So thank you.
Welcome.
Beautiful. I think Daniel and Gavi reflect really all of our gratitude this evening. We're so grateful that you could be with us and share and reflect on this beautiful volume that will inform certainly the rest of our Pride Month. We're grateful and thank you for the gift of this liturgy to the Reformed Jewish world and to all of us. And we're grateful that you could be with us for our Pride celebration this week. So thank you. Thank you.
Happy Pride, everybody. Thank you for having me, Rabbi Mac.
Thank you.
Oh, she's muted.
I said thank you so much. I'm so honored to be with you. Happy Pride, everybody. Cantor, Rabbi Rudy, so much, sweet, so much to be with you. I'm so glad. And use the book. Share with others, and invite your friends to have a opportunity to celebrate Pride faithfully.
Yeah, we absolutely will.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye-bye.